I have I guess you'd call it a belief of my clients' positions. And this is what I think. 85% of them, good person put in a bad situation.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. And that comes particularly into mind when we talk about things like criminal law. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Gary Churak, who runs the eponymous law firm that bears his name, the law office of Gary Churak, PC, down in San Antonio, Texas. Gary, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Well, before we begin, as always, we're going to jump over and actually take a look at your site. It's a pretty easy site to see here. It is Gary Churak Law. That's GaryChurak Law. And we'll have a link to that, as always, down below in the description. You can also give them a call at 210-545-3850. And again, we'll have all of his contact information down below in the about section. Gary, again, is a criminal defense attorney in San Antonio, Texas. So if you find yourself in any of these scenarios or you know someone who is, this might be a really good resource to forward on to them just so they can have an idea of what's going on. Before we get going, we are going to jump over and read from our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is a newer one. This is SearchSift. SearchSift helps high cost per click businesses win before the pay per click auction even starts by influencing what people see in Google's predictive suggestions while they're still formulating their search. Instead of paying $200 to $600 per click in brutal bidding wars, SearchSift puts your brand in front of the searcher earlier, so the eventual click is cheaper, warmer, and more likely to convert. It doesn't replace SEO or ads necessarily, but it completely changes the playing field by moving upstream where intent is being shaped. If you're in personal injury, rehab, med spa, dental implants, criminal law, or any market where clicks are painfully expensive, this is the unfair advantage that you've been looking for. If you want to lock in your metro before a competitor does, book a quick demo at searchsift.com or halfpricepayperclick.com, which is a funny name, halfpricepayperclick.com. You can see how it works before it works, and there's no they don't do anything. There's no, you only pay for results, is what they said. So that's searchsift.com. Our second sponsor for the top of the hour is Habanero Social. Speaking of SEO, what if Google could send you free clients every month? With Habanero Social, it's not a fantasy, it's a reality. Habanero Social is an AI-powered platform that optimizes your Google business profile to attract more local customers effortlessly. From cranking out high-quality content to managing reviews and fine-tuning your local SEO, Habanero Social handles it all while you sit back and watch your business grow. 85% of local searches happen within that Google Maps pack, and so that's the place you need to be to capture those clients. An optimized Google business profile doesn't just show up, it engages and it builds trust, increases clicks, and ultimately boosts your business. And they're so confident that it works, they offer a 3 times ROI guarantee. If you don't make at least 3 times more than you spent with them, they'll refund your money or work for free to make it right. Stop wasting time on old school tactics. Visit habanerosocial.com today and get everything you need to rank higher, engage better, and drive more clients to your business. That's habanerosocial.com. All right, so jumping back over here, and I am talking with Gary. And again, this is his lovely looking website right here. And Gary is, again, a criminal defense attorney. He's in San Antonio, Texas, and he's the founder of the law firm that bears his name, where he focuses on defending individuals facing serious criminal charges. As a sole practitioner, he emphasizes direct, personalized representation. He works very closely with clients through every stage of their case. His practice is grounded in the belief that everyone deserves strong legal advocacy, clear guidance, and a fair chance within the justice system. He appears especially committed to helping people who may be overwhelmed by the process, including first-time offenders navigating unfamiliar legal territory. Now, that was a little bit of a mouthful, and I don't think I barely even scratched the surface. So I guess my first question to you, Gary, as always, is what did I miss? Tell me a little bit more about who you are, what makes Gary Gary, and we'll go from there.
All right. I've been in practice now going on 43 years. Basically got licensed in 1982, been practicing criminal law for God knows how many years, 43 years. Do a vast assortment about everything. I've done everything from a misdemeanor public intoxication to a murder case. So my practice runs very broad. Uh, Generally, I practice pretty much in the state of Texas. I think Texas has 254 counties, and last time I looked, I've got a little map on my in my office. I've actually had a case in 107 of them.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've moved from El Paso to Lubbock to Houston to Dallas to San Antonio to Harlingen, Brownsville. So I've kind of bounced all around the state, but the majority of my practices would be San Antonio to Central, uh, Texas to Hill Country, Kerr County, Bandera County, it's Bear County, Atascosa, those counties around San Antonio area.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That is a lot. I mean, Texas is huge. It's like a third of the continental United States.
Oh yeah,
So traveling around that's got to be intense.
yeah. It's a 6 hour car ride from my house to Lubbock for court.
Well, I'm remiss to say, this year I will be turning 46 years old, which means you've been practicing law since I was probably still in diapers, and that is an
Yeah.
impressive career, sir. So I tip my non-existent hat to you, simply for that. Well, tell me this now. You already gave me a little bit right there, and obviously I've talked about it. But if I didn't know anything about you at all, give me the pitch for your firm. Tell me who specifically helped. Tell me what specific types of crimes you really focus on, or you're known for. Who finds you, and why do they choose to work with you over somebody else?
Well, I wind up doing a lot of what I would call first degree and second degree felony crimes in Texas, which would be anything ranging from murder to drug dealing, mass quantities of narcotics, to aggravated assault, someone shooting somebody, stabbing somebody. Um, that's where I try to concentrate most of my practice in. I also do quite a bit of what's called domestic violence. That's the typical husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend going at it. And usually the husband goes or the boyfriend goes to jail and life gets turned upside down because of that. Also do a vast array of different sex crimes, basically everything from a rape, which we call sexual assault, down to indecency with a child pornography. I've done it both in the federal system and state system.
Gotcha. So here's a question. Actually, people ask me this all the time when they say, when you talk to criminal defense attorneys, does it ever get to them? I'm going to dive right into that's a tough question. I didn't throw to you beforehand, but does it ever get to you? And whenever I talk to them, usually the answer I get there's a mix, and I think this is healthy balance. Is we live in a country where you're guaranteed a fair hearing, and so you are part of the check in the checks and balances, right? But
Mhm.
there has to be a time where sometimes it wears on you. Does it, or how do you muscle through those moments?
I have I guess you'd call it a belief of my clients' positions. And this is what I think 85% of them, a good person put in a bad situation. 5% of them they're just lost. A lot of them have mental illnesses that wind up doing their crime because of their mental illness. I do a lot of cases involving competency and sanity. A lot of times we wind up having clients that self-medicate because they've got bipolar or schizophrenia, and then they wind up doing drugs or alcohol, and that leads down the road. And then my last category is psychopaths. And I believe about 10% of my clients are psychopaths. So basically, I would say a lot of times it's just a good person put in a bad situation. And whether they've done something stupid, they're not hardened criminals or anything like that. But sometimes what they do is a serious offense and they're looking at going away to prison potentially for a long time because they did a stupid thing.
Gotcha. Does it change if you sense psychopathy, how you approach a case or how you approach a client, or do you still approach it in basically the same way every single time?
It depends on the situation, on this person and the situation.
That's fair.
Some clients need more kid gloves than other clients. Some clients need more personal attention than other clients. I mean, it gets to the point where you sit down initially with the client, you talk to them, you review the case, you look at the police report to discovery, you sit down and tell them what their options are. Basically, they've got two options. They take a plea deal that the DA offers, and I try to explain to them. They always say, well, you're working with the DA. You're not working with me. You're not doing. And I explained to him, here's the way it is. The district attorney has the ball. If I want to play catch with the district attorney, they're the ones that set the rules. So in other words, I tell my client, okay, I'll sit down and talk to a guy who's charged with a first degree felony. He's looking 5 to 99 to life. He's got a record. Sometimes they were called habituals, being that they've been to prison at least twice. So he's looking at 25 to life. And I'll sit down and talk to him, and it's a clean case. They've got him dead to cold. And I'll sit down and talk to him and say, okay, here's the deal. Your options are you can take this plea deal. They're offering you the minimum 5 years in prison. They're waiving the habitual, or you can go to trial. And if you're convicted, you're looking at 25 to life. You make the call. 9 out of 10 times they're rational and they say, all right, we're going to take the plea deal because it's a good deal for them. Sometimes they say, no, I'm not taking the deal. And we go to trial and you can figure out what the results are going to be. So it just depends on, I'm a firm believer of not sugarcoating things. And sometimes it gets me a conflict with my client because I'm going to tell them flat out what I believe the case is about, what I believe they can prove, what they're looking at, and then the first word out of their mouth, "Well, you're not working for me." And then I sit down and explain to them, well, this is what I'm trying to do for you. This is what can happen to you. Let's look at it that way or another. And a lot of times they sit down and realize, but you get the hardcore psychopaths that they think they know everything. They've got their jailhouse lawyers and they sit and do their briefs and everything else out of the jail, and they're the difficult ones. I do what's called court appointments in San Antonio, Bexar County. We have a small public defender office, and you can imagine the uh, amount of cases that come through San Antonio, Bexar County courthouse. All right. Well, we have private attorneys that sign up to do court appointments, and they're based upon experience and level of experience. We have to get certified every year, have to do CLE, have to have a number of experience at jury trials, blah, 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 blah. And I'm on what's called the first degree wheel. So I get a lot of the serious crimes, and I feel it's like an obligation for me to provide quality and competent legal, assistance to these people. So it's also part of my practice as I do it's not pro bono, but it should be for what they pay you to do it. But I feel it's like an obligation for me to provide my expertise, to provide, competent legal representation to everyone, even those who can't afford to write a big check.
Yeah. Well, it's actually a question people also ask me a lot is people who find themselves need a criminal lawyer oftentimes aren't in a good financial position. How does that work out? Like like you can share as much or as little as you need to say, but what are the big concerns people have coming to see you and how do you help them through that process?
All right. Well, literally, they will make a determination of whether if you qualify for a court appointed attorney, usually at the time of your arrest. And they'll look at they'll ask you your financial situation or whatever and appoint a court appointed lawyer. I always get a big kick out of sometimes talking to the clients and telling me, well, I know you're my court appointed lawyer, but I'm going to be hiring a free world lawyer. I go, world lawyer? Yeah, well, I'm a free world lawyer. I just do this for the shits and grins, you know. No, I kid around with them, but anyway. So basically, they look at the financial ability to pay. Now, with my situation, if I have somebody coming to my office that needs help and wants to hire me, and they don't have the ability to write me a big check right there and then, or what I'll do is a lot of times I'll say, all right, I need this for a down payment, and we're going to work a monthly payment plan. And every month you pay me X number of dollars every month, and I'll be your lawyer. You quit paying me, I won't be your lawyer. That's usually what do a lot of times for people to help them in a financial situation.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. And sometimes you got to work. It is going to be obviously on a case by case basis every single time. But that's good to know. And for people that have that question, it's good for them to hear those kinds of answers. So let me ask you this. Now, one of my favorite questions to ask attorneys, again, you've been practicing for almost as long as I've been alive. And as I said in the pre-roll, I say this all the time, you step up to bat enough times, nobody bats 1,000. I am sure in your career, at least once or twice, you've swung and you've missed. Can you let my listeners know, Gary, about a time or two in your practice of law where you experienced failure or setback, but what did you learn from it, and how do you carry that forward? How have you carried that forward? Always make sure you're giving the best care to your clients.
Well, no one is going to bat 1,000 representing criminal law. No one's going to bat 500. You'd show me a person that tries 100 jury trials and gets 50 not guilties, and I'll show you somebody that's, I don't know what to describe it, but it doesn't exist. Yeah, I have had not guilties. I've had guilty verdicts. I mean, I've had some cases where going in, honestly, I knew the guy was going to be convicted, but I did my utmost ability to try to represent him to the fullest extent of what I could do for him. And that's something, you have to look at. They have the option to take a plea and go to trial. If they go to trial, even if the case is long, I'm trying to think of specific cases. And God, I've had guilty verdict. I've got one here. Okay, I've got a guy. He's he's living in a trailer, a rundown RV. They show up. He's what we call a sovereign citizen. He's one of these guys that, basically there's no government. He's this government, he operates as a trust and all that. He's a nut job, basically, put it this way. Constables show up to a victim. All right. He proceeds to get into an argument with them, doesn't open the door, and shoots through the RV into the floor. Of course, it's elevated, the bull goes down. They charge him for aggravated assault on a peace officer, first degree felony. They were thinking capital punishment to start with, but basically didn't kill anybody. All right, so we go to trial, and of course he's convicted. I mean, I almost pulled some really good things out in that trial, but it was one of these deals. Okay, he shot the gun at some officers. His defense is self-defense. Well, is it self-defense to try to shoot some officers serving a writ on you to evict you? And I argued that basically, hell, they could have towed it out of there. They could have, you know, turned off his utilities and things like that to get him out of there. And basically, I mean, it turned out to be the whole SWAT operation when they came in. But anyway, so he got convicted. He got like 25 years, which he was looking at 5 to 99 to life, and he shot at, a couple officers. But anyway, that's I didn't expect to win that case, and I didn't. Um, I've had sex cases where they're charged with aggravated sexual assault of a child. And that's probably one of the toughest cases because bottom line, they believe the kid, you're going to lose. If I can put a hole in the theory of why the kid's testifying, you always got a chance for reasonable doubt. My classic is I had one where, and I've had them before. Mom remarries stepdad's an authoritarian. Kid don't like stepdad in the house. Kids go to school. Kids tell kid, hey, just tell him dad touched you. Had a number of them through years, and you have to just dig it out, and talk about the relationship in the family. And it's something like that. And when you're picking a jury in a case like that, when you're voir dire, you're talking to the jury and you're trying to find out how many people have seen this or know about this situation, and there's quite a few of them that would raise their hand and say, yeah, I've heard that, I've seen that, where they can get dad out of the house. And
Yeah.
that happens and I've had cases like that. If they believe the kid, you're screwed. If the kid's testimony is kind of contradictory or or unable to be verified, then you got a shot. But, they throw full guns at you. They bring in a sane nurse that testifies exactly what the kid said, and they bring in, a bunch of other people, police officers and entourage of people with this little kid. And it's a show, but they're the hard cases to do. And I've had quite a few not guilty verdicts in those type of cases, but I've also had guilty verdicts where people have gone to prison for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's the way
That's
it
a,
works.
that's probably I would think that would be one of the toughest ones because nobody wants to see actual, innocent children harmed. Like,
Right.
there's this famous Jewish carpenter rabbi from a couple thousand years ago that had some choice words about millstones and necks for people that do things to little children. But you're absolutely right at the same time that, sometimes there are false allegations. And I have to say, I have a bias. Like internally, when you tell me this is a sex abuse case against a minor, I'm immediately like, this guy's guilty. He has to be guilty. As soon as you say it, like my gut reaction is, this guy has to be guilty. And we forget that no, that's not always the case. And I think that's an important reason why we do have the checks and balances that we have. You're the stopgap that just prevents people from being capriciously thrown into prison. And I think that's
And
important.
about that is they'll bring in a voir dire panel, which is a jury panel, and usually they'll bring in 80, maybe 100 people sometimes for these type of cases, and sit them all in the courtroom. And of course, you're asking them questions. And one of the questions I always ask is there any member of the jury panel who has a personal experience by themselves or someone that may have been a victim of, some kind of illegal sexual contact or something? And you would be surprised how many people raise their hand. It's some of them are like, yeah, my cousin Bill, he was accused by his stepdaughter of touching her, but it was bullshit, things like that. And you'd be surprised. I have busted what's called busted panels. When you bust a panel, you need, let me strive for it, 12 jurors, and each side gets 10 preemptive strikes. So we can get rid of 10 people because we don't like the clothes they wear. My philosophy is if you come in with a mask on in 2026, you're not on my jury. Yeah, but anyway, so you need at least 32 people out of 80 to be at the panel. And I've actually been in a situation where we busted panels where we've gotten down to less than 32 jurors because they could not sit as a fair and impartial jury in types of cases like that. So they're tough cases, but they're cases that can be won with the right theory and right, evidence and client, which means a lot too.
I'm gonna ask you a question here that's gonna border on political. You bordered on political a second ago. I'm not going to force you into any particular political conversation, but you mentioned that you see someone with a mask on in 2026, and you don't want them on the jury. My understanding is the people that are still masking up these days tend to be, we'll just say, on the left side of the political spectrum, which tends to, in my opinion, be more, I don't want to say this politically correct, right? Mindful of the rights of criminals, right? So it almost strikes me as maybe those would be the people you would want on a panel, but maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
I just look at it that they live in an alternate reality.
That's fair. During COVID, actually, this is a question I tend to ask people. I phased it out because now we're 6 years out, so it feels like it was forever ago. It was over half a decade ago. But how was your experience doing criminal law in the midst of COVID? Did everything just shut down? Did you guys do
The,
teletrials? How
the,
was that?
the courthouses shut down for a while. I mean, we were not shut. Texas kind of opened up quasi like, but depending on where you were in Texas, depending on how, before they made it all statewide. But we were basically doing dockets by Zoom. I was sitting there at I went to the office. I couldn't sit in the house, and if I was at home, my wife would make me do too many things. So I just went to the office and worked. But we were doing dockets by Zoom, pleas by Zoom. We didn't have any trials, but that's how we were moving cases basically. And they were making sweetheart deals because they had people in the jail they had to get rid of out of the jail because of the overcrowding because there wasn't any trial. So we moved a lot of cases during COVID for really good pleas.
Hmm, that's fascinating. So I asked you a minute ago about your one of your biggest failures. I forgot to ask you the flip side of that coin, however. So I want to give you a fair shot here. Tell me about one or two of your cases, Gary, that you've tried that you're most proud of, the proverbial feathers in your cap, so to speak.
All right, I've got one, and it's let me try to explain it to you this way. I had a 46-year-old guy and a 16-year-old girl that had a daddy complex, I believe. All right. Texas, you cannot consent to sex if you are under 17 years old. All right. So in this situation, there was a lot of alcohol involved, a lot of he literally was providing alcohol to these little girls at a party, and then he picked up one of them, took her home, and they had fun in the sun. And he got busted on the way back because he was drunk, and then they found the whole story of the girl. And we went to a jury trial. I mean, he was looking at aggravated sexual assault, 5 to 99 to life, because he fried her with alcohol. She was intoxicated. We went to a jury trial, trying to get him probation. But this little girl, she had fake IDs. She had pictures of hers in bars drinking. My closing argument was basically she's 16 going on 30, and went to a jury. Jury found him guilty on 2 counts, but then they came back on sentencing and they only sentenced him to the minimum 5 years. And it was one of these deals with, hey, I wanted probation, but that was going to be hard with the alcohol and everything. And uh, I guess this came back and said we can't give him probation, but we're going to give him the minimum 5 years. So they gave him 5 years. I go home afterwards, and the judge calls me and says, Gary, you did one hell of a job. In my years of the bench, I have never seen anybody in a case like this get single digits, meaning a 5 year sentence and not
Yeah,
20-year sentence.
yeah.
So that was one of the good ones. And then I've tried, let's see, I tried one this couple months ago. Guy was accused of having sex, raping his wife. They were splitting up. We tried it. He got found not guilty. Uh, there was inconsistencies. I can't go back and think of all the not guilties. That was the funny part. In 43 years to try to put together how many cases we've tried and how many cases are, been found not guilty, how many cases have been found guilty. So I'd say, in terms of percentage, I don't look at percentages, but actually I'm probably saying about 30 to 40% of my cases I've gotten not guilties, which I'm happy with.
I mean, in
But
baseball, those
there's
are great numbers.
yeah, and it's they got to prove me in a reasonable doubt. Give me some ammunition, and I can create reasonable doubt.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Um, a related question. I
Mhm.
find attorneys deal with some of the most unintentionally hilarious moments. Have you ever encountered, or what's one of the most absurd or funny or just off the wall moments you've encountered in your practice of law?
There's probably been so many of them.
In the last week or two?
I'm trying even the last week or two. I always crack up a joke or two in the courthouse with the DAs. They always think I'm funny. Um, I'm trying to think. God, what's a funny thing that happened? I did have a client. We have to provide a lot of times when they're arrested in an inappropriate attire for court, shorts or t-shirt or something. So they put us upon the obligation to dress your client, which is, ridiculous. I go to Goodwill, I buy them a shirt, pants, and shoes, and hopefully get the right size. Well, I had this little guy, and he was charged with assault of a peace officer and a couple other things, and we were going to go to trial. It worked out a good deal for him where he took the plea. But anyway, I bought him a little yuppie outfit, blue shirt, khaki pants, nice pair of shoes. And he goes, Mr. Churak, this outfit here, cool. Thank you. And it was like, okay, do I get to keep it? I said, yes, you get to keep it because I got your old clothes. I don't think you want.
Yeah. That's fair. I got called in once for some sort of a preliminary hearing that there was a payment dispute with a credit card company like a decade ago. And it was funny because I got there and I waited and I waited and waited. They never actually called me forward, but I got to watch everyone else go forward. And most people came dressed in like their work clothes or jeans and a t-shirt or whatever, which, I feel like 50 years ago that wouldn't have happened. Everyone would have been in suit and ties. And this one guy came in and he was wearing one of those full body like onesies that looks like an animal. And he was literally dressed, I think it was like a donkey. Like he had like the donkey hoodie hat on and like the tail hanging down as he was walking in to read his paper to the judge and give his plea or whatever it happened to be. And it was just the most bizarre moment ever. I'm like, if I was ever trying to curry favor at all in a legal issue, even if I couldn't afford, a suit and tie from Goodwill, I don't think I would show up in a donkey suit.
Got a good one for you. Show up in a DWI case with a t-shirt that says save water, drink beer. Or have your client, when you sit and talk to him at hall before we go to the courthouse and do a plea, and he smells like a marijuana farm and he's charged with possession of marijuana. And I'm going, and when I can smell him from 5 feet away, I'm going, we're not going to go talk to the judge about this case, are we? No, we're not. I'm going to reset it. Next time you come to court, lay off the pot.
For at least like an hour. Like
Yeah,
just don't wake and bake and you'll be fine, buddy. It's okay. Or, you start raising a skunk farm and then you're like, oh no, it's just a occupational hazard.
here we go. Free advice. Do not smoke pot in your car because when you get pulled over, the officer will smell the marijuana and they will search the car. And dollars to donuts, they will find more than pot.
Sound advice, sound advice. I would recommend not doing it in your car at all because you know what? Stay home.
Yeah.
If you're in an area where it's legal, that's totally fine, but don't be driving
Well,
impaired. That's just not
they
a
call
smart
that
maneuver.
term hot boxing. I
Mhm.
guess it helps all the concentration in the closed up
All you're
car.
breathing in is the smoke, right? So it's
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't have fresh air, so you're probably going to feel it intensely, I would guess. Who's your favorite attorney in pop culture? You've been around for a while. Are you like a Matlock, Perry Mason sort of a fella? Do you like some of the modern shows? Are you a My
My
Cousin Vinny kind of a
my
guy?
cousin Vinny. I've always told law students that they need to watch my. In fact, I've had a couple of assistants through the years that were law students, working with me and stuff. And I've told them before you can be a lawyer, you have to watch My Cousin Vinny.
Famous Joe Pesci, Ralph Macchio.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually been a long time since I've seen it. I need to go back and rewatch that. But that really is a classic
Mhm.
movie. So let me ask you some more specific questions about law. I kind of want to dig into your area of expertise here while I've got you.
All right.
A lot of people think only about criminal defense after an arrest, but what do you wish people understood before they ever find themselves in that situation, other than stop breaking the law?
Well, my advice is anytime a cop shows up at your door, you call an attorney. Don't volunteer testimony. I have had too many cases where, for instance, on a lot of sex crimes, they will get you in their little cubicle and they will start talking to you about the case. And what they're trying to do is everybody thinks, well, they're just trying to get my side of the story. No, they're trying to get a confession out of you, or they're trying to get enough evidence out of you to be able to build a confession. Their classic one line is, well, if you can apologize or you can say something to the complaining witness, blah, 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 what would you tell them? And they say, oh, I would feel so sorry that and they're stupid because they've been led into giving a confession through and cops can lie. Supreme Court said the cops can lie. So, they're going to pull every trick in the book. So I usually tell my clients, one, you don't talk to the cops without an attorney, and two, most of the time you don't talk to them anyway. You know, so that's number one. And then uh depending on the nature of the crime, always have a source of an individual phone number memorized because they're going to take your phone they're going to take your wallet, and then you got to get a hold of somebody to call to get out on bail. And if you think about it, all your contacts are on your phone. And how many know your wife or your girlfriend's or your mother's phone number?
That is a fascinating development in our modern culture because I grew up, again, I'm a child of the 80s. So I grew up knowing everyone's phone number. Like you had the little pad next to the fridge of like your aunts, your uncles. I knew them all by heart. I could call my aunts without even looking at the pad. I could call my grandma. I knew my mom's number. I knew my best friend's number. Like that was just a thing. But yeah, modern days, I know my wife's number and I don't even know my kids' numbers. Like they're just in my phone. Like they're in there. I could, maybe look them up if I needed to. And I just, call my son, call my daughter, whatever it is. I
Yeah.
don't even know their numbers. Like if I ever need to get a hold of them, I did on my phone. This is reminding me I should probably put those on a flashcard and carry them in my pocket for a while until I remember memorize their number.
I'm just saying, I've seen it 100 times where they get arrested and then they can't think about a number to call or somebody to get a bond set for.
Yeah, no, that's
Sometimes a cop will give you your phone to find a number to call, but if they're assholes, they may not.
yeah, no, that's rough. I don't know what you would do there. Um, so how often in a case in criminal defense, when does it usually turn on facts and when does it usually turn on procedure, like the way that the case is decided?
Think that what's the term they want to use? Dismissed because of a loophole or something
Mhm.
like that. That doesn't exist.
Because that's
It
the
doesn't.
common, yeah, everyone sees that like, oh, you're
It's
just
on.
gonna find a technicality,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. It exists in TV. If they've got a faulty indictment, they can amend the indictment. So very rarely do you have a situation where you're going to have a case dismissed on quote a technicality in Texas, at least. Now you could have it dismissed to the point where you've got a successful motion to suppress or something like that. That's based upon the law and facts, but just because they didn't dot the T's right or cross the T's and dot the I's doesn't mean you walk free.
Yeah.
And I have so many times people try to bring that out. Well, that indictment's not correct. It's or this doesn't correct, or the police report's not correct. And I said it doesn't matter. You know,
Somebody had said, I remember hearing somebody telling a story like, oh, what you got to do is carry around a fake ID. And when they arrest you, you give them that stuff, and then they get all the wrong information, and then everything is invalid. I'm like, that doesn't sound legitimate to
no,
me.
actually, they charge you for basically uh, submitting a fake identity to a peace officer. It's a class A misdemeanor. Have a couple of those.
So you get an extra slap on the wrist on top
You
of
get an
everything
ex-
else.
Oh yeah, yeah. Believe me, if the cops want to get you, that I've had cases where they've nailed him on 8 or 9 charges. They just keep on writing something, and they can figure it out. And then your one case turns into 9 cases, and try to make bond on 9 cases versus one case because you've got an attitude or you're playing games.
Um, you deal with a lot of different kinds of cases, obviously. I
Mhm.
would assume, other than the child cases, maybe domestic violence cases would be some of the more difficult ones. I know that domestic violence allegations, they're going to be emotionally charged. They're probably going to be very legally complicated. What what makes what makes domestic violence allegations uniquely difficult?
First thing is, if you are charged and convicted, or even get a deferred adjudication on a family violence case, you're pretty much screwed because you're going to be looking at your jobs. It's going to be on your criminal record forever. You're going to lose your Second Amendment rights. You're going to potentially have a protective order against you where you're not going to be able to see your kids for 2 years. So there's a lot of baggage that goes with these cases that people don't realize the 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 effect of it. Um, a lot of times I'll look at these cases and we'll argue mutual combat, or they're going through a divorce and want to get, a lot of times it's child custody. You know, if you have a finding of family violence, you can never be considered to be a primary custodian of your children. So figure it this way. You get convicted of family violence. Your kids are 13, 14 years old, they want to go live with you. By law, they can't because you have a conviction of family violence, can never be primary possession of those children. So a lot of times that's used as leverage by the women in divorces. They get the protective order. Because it assures them to have complete control of the kids. And there's
Mhm.
never an issue of child custody involved with it in that situation. And I see that quite often.
Gotcha. Without going into like confidential details, what's some of the biggest gray areas that'll show up in a domestic violence allegation?
Well, the interesting part about that is a lot of questions say, well, what evidence do they have? I say, all they need is for her to sit on the stand and to go to the police department and say, he hit me, he choked me, he did this to me. And they'll even ask questions a lot of times that'll leading questions that'll get into, like, for instance, if you impede breathing, it's a felony. If you just assault, it's class A misdemeanor. So a lot of times the cops will go, hey, do you feel like he had his hands around your neck? Did you feel like your breathing was improved? And of course, a lot of times they'll say yes, just to answer it. Or, they'll embellish what happened, for the purposes of building a situation. A lot of times it's just the complaints are based upon pure emotion. They're pissed off. They're gonna say whatever they say, and then that's always the fun part. When then a week later they're calling me up saying they need to do an affidavit of non-prosecution, and I say, okay, well, are you going to tell the DA that you made everything up? Because uh, just signing an affidavit of non-prosecution is going to make this go away. So, and even if you tell them that you made it up, they're gonna basically use that against you, and they can even charge you with an offense, lying to a police officer. So, that's part of the problem in dealing with domestic violence. There's a lot at stake, and it's usually just one side. If it's believable, you're screwed.
Right. How often and we all carry around little magical squares in our pockets these days that have cameras and recording equipment, and everything else? How has that shifted what you do when it comes to defending clients? Does that factor in more often than it used to, as social media posts and everything
Well,
else? Or
occasionally you'll have the video of what's going on that day, and okay, I got a good one for you. Well, my guy he's a druggie. He's dating another crazy druggie who's got probably mental issues. Um, he gets charged with robbery of her cell phone. They did a video. There was a video of this whole incident where she's basically running around naked, jumping on him, scratching him, pulling him, and he's holding the phone like this. She's naked. And I had the video of it. And I go and sit down in front of the J. I go, want some entertainment for this morning? Watch this video. And she looks at me and turns back and goes, okay, so we're not going to go forward on that one. But if the guy pleads on the possession case, we'll cut a good deal. But cell phone.
oh, that's funny. I mean, I talked to family law attorneys fairly frequently as well, and one of the things I've seen that's come up is in the middle of a divorce hearing or a divorce case or a custody case, you'll have one of those issues where one of the parents is doing something stupid or whatnot. So I don't know if that's something that you encounter or has become more frequent as I think we become more technologically savvy, and obviously the technology is just ubiquitous at this point. It's everywhere. But I think we've also become stupider as a culture. And I mean that in the nicest way possible, but like we've lost an element of common sense, and we think everything needs to be public, where we need to build our social clout by
Mhm.
showing the things that we're doing. Do criminals often film themselves doing stupid stuff, or
I have had that situation occasionally, but not often. Most of it's some kind of security video or something like that, that catches them in the act.
yeah? I figured
you
that would be
know,
the case. Well, and those are probably far more common now in higher definition and everything else than they used to be. It used to just be the grainy 50 times recorded over VHS cassette, and now it's
mhm,
probably,
yeah.
high def and saved and everything else, which is good. Um, what's something that you think people get wrong about criminal defense lawyers? What's a misconception you think the public has about what you do?
Oh, let's just see. Hired guns, snakes. Our reputation sometimes isn't the best because people picture us getting criminals off, we're the bad guys. We're letting criminals off, but we're just defending the Constitution and giving the rights of an individual to be represented, the Sixth Amendment, basically. And
Yeah,
the truth of the matter is, there are innocent people in prison that have been convicted. You see that all the time. There's innocent people that have walked out of the courtroom with not guilty verdicts. There's
yeah,
guilty people who have walked out of the courtroom with not guilty verdicts. It's just the way the system works. We are just basically part of the Constitution. We're just representing our client to the utmost of our ability. And if we don't, it's ineffective assistance of counsel, and they can open it up and bring all kind of things going on. Get
yeah,
the case set aside.
yeah. Well, and there's all those stories of posthumous exonerations, right? Somebody gets the death
Yeah.
penalty and then like, oops, we messed up.
Well,
Whoopsie.
DNA has done a lot of that, has led up to a lot of people getting, let go because they weren't the victim.
Do you
And of
think, just
course
out
there
of
was,
curiosity, oh, go ahead.
uh, and of course there was some, when there were prosecutional misconduct back in the day when they didn't have to give you all the evidence. They were
Yeah,
selective was to give you.
that would make sense. Do you think that sometimes exonerations are false? Like, oh, it doesn't match the DNA, but the DNA is so old it's corrupted. I've heard people ask these questions. I don't know the answer to it, so I don't know if you have an opinion on the thought.
No, I think DNA is pretty strong.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, and to explain DNA, it's always funny because it's not 100%. There's always the unknown individual that's there for that 1 billionth of a percent. And I sometimes I've used that against the DA. I had a client that the same guy we talked about previously that got the 5 years. They had the DNA on him. It was pretty clear, but it was 99.9999999%. But there was 1/100th of a billionth percent of unknown guy. He was getting all excited. See, there's an unknown guy. And I said, no, it's not something that can be absolute, but it's, pretty absolute.
You
And,
picked out one grain of sand, and that's your grain of sand that you threw on the beach. What are the
but
odds
you
we
know
find that
what?
one?
I had the DA running around in circles trying to figure out how to dispute that because they didn't understand DNA.
That's funny.
But anyway, I
Excuse
think
me.
DNA is pretty solid.
Pretty airtight. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, I don't want to take up your whole afternoon here. So here in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably ask you our closing questions. I'll give them to you right now so you can percolate on them, and we'll jump over and take a look at your site again. Question number one is just this: if you could change, 40 some odd years of practice. If you could change something about your practice, what would you change and why? With the magic wand, just poof, and it's different. Number two, if you can go back in time, meet young Gary and give him some advice other than the obvious, which is buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it till it hits 100K. What advice would you give yourself and why? And number three is if I gave you my magical pen and with this pen you could change one law, what law would you change? While you're percolating on that, we're going to jump back over and take a look at your website. Again, I am talking with attorney Gary Churak of the law offices of Gary Churak PC. He is a criminal defense attorney, as you can tell, down in San Antonio, Texas. And you can visit him online at garychuraklaw.com. You can also give him a call at 210-545-3850. If you Google him online, you'll see he's got really good stars, over almost 4.5 stars with over 50 reviews. So clearly people are pretty happy with the service he provides, which is always good to see as well. And so if you find yourself in need of a criminal defense attorney and you're in Texas, I think Gary would be a good result or a good option for you. Our final sponsor for today is Rank with News, and they are right here. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News or Forbes, Bloomberg, and others, and see those articles ranking locally, sometimes nationally, in under 8 hours for major competitive keywords that people were actually looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page one in under 2 weeks safely, organically, and permanently. This is guaranteed SEO or search engine optimization on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking long term. If you're tired of poor visibility for your business, visit rankwith.news to learn more and book a time to speak with a specialist about featuring your firm or business in major national 8 figures traffic sites that can launch you to page one in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, and win more customers and clients with rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news. All right, so Gary, I give you my magic wand, and with this magic wand, you can change one thing about your practice, other than the amazing bust you have in the back on the wall there. What one thing would you change about your practice if you could change something?
Oh Lord. I really don't know. That's a tough question because, well, I can tell you. Let's get rid of the computers. But anyway, it's everything's gotten computerized and everything. I spend so much time pulling discovery off computers,
Mm,
police reports and things. I could spend a week because I get 15, 20 notifications. This is available. This is available. I miss the old days where they have everything on paper. You just went to the courthouse and looked at it. But anyway, that's the law. They have to make full disclosure.
that's
It's
the legal equivalent of card catalog, right? At the
yeah,
library.
yeah,
Most kids don't know what that is anymore.
yeah.
How to use it. I miss those days.
Exactly, exactly. But I mean, that's something that's never going to happen. It's just, I guess I'm old school. I mean, I started practicing before computers.
Yeah,
I
no, that's
remember
fair.
word processing thing, and it was like a computer type thing, but it wasn't a computer. There was no internet or anything like that. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember the bag phone, the pager. Yeah, so
I
back in
remember
the
those
day.
the very first word processors. They had like the little tiny like blue screen on them. It was just enough to see your text, and you'd work. And I think it probably had like 500 kilobits of RAM.
Yeah,
It was all barely nothing in there, but enough to type out like a 20-page paper and print it. And it would print it when you were done, so you could edit it and typeset it before it was done. I remember those. I learned to
yeah.
type on those back in the day. So I guess I'll date myself a little bit. Not that everyone already knows how old I am anyway, which is just slightly less old than your legal career. Okay, so question number two. If you can go back in time and meet young Gary and give him some advice, maybe it's 1982 or 2 years into a Reagan presidency, and you just are fresh out of law school, and you're able to go over and whisper something in your ear. What advice would you give young Gary?
What advice would I give young Gary? Buy Microsoft.
Yeah, I said buy Bitcoin doesn't count, but you know what? Apple, Microsoft, those are all. I guess those are fair. I didn't exclude those.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit and say become a doctor, but that wasn't going to work because I can't do math. Uh, but anyway, yeah, it would be hard to say. I mean, I wanted to be a lawyer. I chose to be a lawyer, and that's what I decided to do. So, Gary got out of the law school and got thrown in the fire.
That's awesome. I mean, it's great that you're doing what you want to do. Like the one thing I wouldn't want to hire is an attorney that's like, oh, I hate the law. But it was either this or medical school, and I didn't want to go to medical school because kind of like but knowing that this is like your passion, this is something that you care about, I think is huge. Like that's important, right? And they say if you do what you love, and you don't have to love every aspect of what you're doing, obviously, but in general, if it's something you enjoy, it makes it better. I love running a podcast, so I like talking to
You
people
know
and
what my
getting to know
wife
them.
would
And
have told me?
what's
You
that?
should have done. You should have done PI.
And then you'd be not the bad guy, but you'd be the ambulance chaser, right?
Yeah, yeah, the ambulance chaser.
I work with a lot of personal injury attorneys as well. They're actually my main set of clients. So I love the PI guys, and I respect them too because they step into the gap when people are injured and don't have money, and they take it on themselves. Now, obviously, they're only going to take cases I think are going to win, but I like the contingency concept. I think that's solid. In your situation, obviously, there's not really contingency fee for getting arrested or going to jail.
No,
So
no, it's hard to do criminal law on a contingency
yeah.
fee. Well, if you go to prison, you don't owe me anything, which is usually the case anyway. If they have balance and they get, yeah,
Yeah,
but
it sorts itself out in the end, so I guess that's fair. All right,
yeah,
probably my favorite question is this one. If I gave you my magical pen, now this pen is almost out of ink. It's got like just that much ink in it, so there's not enough in here to make a big change. But you could change one law. You could strike it from the books. You could add a new law to the books, or you could edit a law that's on the books. If you could strike, edit, add, or change a law, what law would you change?
oh, geez, that's a tough one. I would tell you it's kind of stupid. It doesn't have anything to do with criminal law. It's just our stupid legislature. We have something in Texas, and I've actually talked to a legislator about this, that if you do a refi and pull money out of a refi, you cannot subsequently take a line of credit against your property. You have to do another refi.
Hmm.
So it's so basically, it's hard to explain, but basically, in other words, you have to go through the whole, pay the points, pay the new mortgage and everything else to get money out again. So 20 years ago, if I take a refi 20 years ago and pull some money out of my equity, the only way I can do that again is refi at a higher interest rate to do it. I can't take a line of credit to do a home improvement. That's the
Yeah.
law in Texas, but it's changing, hopefully. Because I spoke to a friend of mine, a state legislator, about that, explained it to him. And he goes, oh shit, I didn't know that. I got to do that too. And I didn't know I couldn't.
Well, it sounds like a
So,
good law to change. So you may not
yeah,
even
that
need
has
the
nothing
pen.
to do with criminal law. It's just personal.
That's okay. I always tell people it could be any law, major or small. It could be the law that makes you fill out forms in triplicate. You can get rid of parking tickets, whatever you want to
Yeah.
get rid of. So sounds like a good one. That sounds like a dumb law, a law that maybe somebody put on the books because it was well-meaning or they just weren't paying attention to the ramifications of it, which I think is the implications. A lot of laws are that way, right? Like, oh, this sounds like a good idea. And you don't look like
Mhm.
3 steps down the road. So I get it. That's fine. Well, Gary, I appreciate you taking time to talk to me today.
No
I always like to
problem.
let my guests have the final words. Are there any parting words of wisdom or last thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, don't get in trouble.
Yeah, stop breaking the law.
Yeah.
Gary wants to be out of business, so if you guys could just stop breaking the law, that would be great. Well, Gary, I
Well,
appreciate it.
I tell you what, if you're in a car accident, call me and maybe I can just change my practice.
There you go. Good luck with that. Good luck with
All
that.
right.
Well, this has
Have a
been the attorney post. I've been chatting with attorney Gary Churak of the eponymous law firm that bears his name, the law offices of Gary Churak PC. Again, we'll have all of his information down below. As always, this podcast, though we do talk about legal issues and occasionally even the word advice will come up, this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. Now, I can say if you live in the San Antonio area or basically anywhere in Texas, because clearly Gary likes to travel, has gun, will travel. He might be a wonderful resource for you. So if you find yourself in need of help, please feel free to seek him out. If you're watching the podcast on any of the major chat channels that are out there, whether it's Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, etc., please feel free to like us, subscribe, leave us a review, rate us, etc. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment down below. But the number one thing you can do to help the podcast grow, as always, is if you know someone who would benefit from this information, in this case, somebody facing a criminal charge in Texas, feel free to share this with them so that they can at least start to get the information they need to protect their rights. Because as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Until next time, this is Justin West with the Attorney Post, signing off.